Thank you. My wife says I need a haircut. Show of hands, who thinks I need a haircut? Yeah, there's a work meeting coming up, so. But I was studying for this instead of getting a haircut. Thank you, Jacob. All right, so I practiced the sermon. It came out to 43 minutes. So we're going to have to skip over all this mumbo jumbo about it's great to be with you. I'm happy to be on. I feel honored to preach. We don't have time for it. We just have time for this question. Are you hungry? They were confirming the title with me up there just a couple minutes ago. They were like, are you hungry? And I was like, yes and yes. Okay. Are you hungry? You know, we're coming out of Christmas time, right? Many of us probably sat down, had a meal. It's pretty good. I want to tell you about a meal that I had. I had my parents visit on Christmas Eve, and we did Texas Roadhouse family-style pickup. They have a family meal deal. You get 4 steaks, you get a salad, you get like more rolls than you know what to do with. You get a couple pints of sides. And when I sat down at that meal, I was hungry. You know what I mean? Like, and every bite I took, I was like, yes, more of that. The corn was perfect. The steak was done perfectly. And so I got to thinking, like, as much as I hunger after this physical food in front of me, man, shouldn't we be hungering after God that times 1,000, right? And so you might be able to imagine a meal where you were just like, I want that next bite to your, like deep down in your core. Like, I want that. And that's how I want to feel about God. You may feel like this dog. That dog looks pretty hungry. I hope you feel like that. And when I talk about hunger, it actually made me think about Rocky III. And the next slide will show us a little picture of Rocky. So Rocky III is the one that has Mr. T in it. And he plays Clubber Lang. Rocky had already beaten Apollo Creed, and he has defended his title like 10 times. And then Clubber Lang comes out, he's like, you just fighting them setups, you know? And Mick says this. He says, I'll do this voice. He says, this guy, he's a wrecking machine, and he's hungry. He says, Rock, you ain't been hungry since you won the title. And I wonder, could that ever describe maybe some of us in our faith walk? Man, feels like I haven't been hungry since I came up out of the water. What happened? I hope it doesn't describe us, but it could. And maybe you're in a time where you're thinking, I'm not as hungry as I used to be. So, we're not talking about hunger to win a fight like Clubber Lang. We're talking about hunger for God. I want you to imagine this. Imagine that we go out of here tonight and a big meteor comes down and it just destroys this church building. And we check the insurance policy and they don't cover meteors. Oh, man. What would be left? What would our church be like? How would it function? What would it do if the facility wasn't here at all? I think the people who would keep coming back to assemble, I think that would be the hungry people. So it's an important question. Are you hungry? And how you respond to the question, I think is going to affect your eternity. And I think it'll affect the eternity of people around you, too. So we'll do the easy part. You know, Doug gets up here and he says a lot of what he does is reminding people. So this is an easy part. I'm going to remind you what you should be hungering for. So we could go a couple ways with that. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say that you're hungry for something. I'm assuming. I think you're hungry for something, but I can't tell you what it is. Matthew 5, verse 6 says, Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. It does not say carmus internal. Apparently, like every document I write says carmus internal. Anyways, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Are you hungry for righteousness? What does that even really mean? Like, you want to do what's right? Do you want to be in the right? You want to be with Jesus, on his side? How much do you hunger for righteousness? How much do you think about, how much energy do you put in your day trying to look more and more like Jesus every day? Or would it be fair to say that you go through this day and that day and the next day and you don't really think about it? Where are you at on that? I can't tell you, but you can tell you. 1 Peter 2, 2-3. Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. Now, some of you know, I like a tall glass of milk as much as the next guy. I think it's delicious. I think it's a nice way to connect with people. I don't think that's the kind of milk he's talking about here. What's he talking about? This milk helps us grow up into salvation, and it's pure and it's spiritual. I think our clues there are pure and spiritual. If you back up to chapter 1, you'll read a lot about the Word. I think this milk is the Word. What's the purest thing that we have? It's the Word. The Word of God is purer than anything. It's 100% pure. The word spiritual there, that word in the Greek, it's derived from the word logos. And that may ring a bell to you guys. Logos is the word. So some translations even translate it. They say something to the effect of long for the pure milk of the word. Okay, so we should be hungry for righteousness. We should be hungry for the word. Let's see what else we got going on here. This moves right, segues nicely. Psalm 119, verse 20. My soul is consumed with longing for your rules all the time. So we did talk about his word, but now we're in kind of a specific part of his word, his rules. You might be thinking, Michael, why would I long for rules? Sometimes rules kind of slow you down, don't they? Like, there's a lot of speed limit 25 areas that I think should be 40. Who's with me? Yeah, some people are with me. Rules, sometimes they can feel restrictive, okay? But here's what I'm going to say. We should change our mindset about God's rules. It's not that God's trying to restrict us. He doesn't, he's not just laughing ha, they have to drive 25, suckers. That's not God. God, if we can trust that God is all good and that he's all-knowing and all-wise, that means every one of his rules is fantastic. Every one of his rules is good for us. It would be silly, it would be a fool's errand to not want to abide by his rules because they are good for us. What else should we hunger for? Let's think about the right kind of food. John 4, 31 through 38. It's longer, so you have to look this one up the old-fashioned way. It says, meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, that's Jesus, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I love this part. He said to them, I have food to eat that you don't know about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? And Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me, and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, there are yet 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see the fields are white for harvest. Already the one who reaps is receiving wages and gathering fruit for eternal life, so that sower and reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. So Jesus says, look, I have this other food. You don't know anything about it. He says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. His food is to do the will of God. I think that's true of us too. The passage from John 6:35, just a couple chapters later, Jesus says that I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me shall never thirst. So we have doing God's will as food, as a way to sustain us. And we have Jesus himself who sustains us. We get a nice pile of things here. We should hunger for righteousness, hunger for his rules. There's one verse we didn't go to. It was seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. Okay, so that's something we should be pursuing. His word we should be hungering after, and Jesus himself. So we have, I don't want to just leave you with like spiritual buzzwords like, yeah, love, What might this look like practically? You can spot a hungry person, you can spot hungry qualities, and might I suggest you start in the mirror. And if you don't have a mirror, you can just do it in your mind. So when you self-reflect, maybe ask yourself questions like, is pursuing God a day-to-day priority in my life? My head comes up off the pillow. Do I think about God? Do I talk to him? The things that I say, the things that I do, is any of that fitting in to a larger priority of spreading his love and his gospel? Does my Christianity function outside of these church walls? It should. Do I feel like I'm in a spiritual rut? Am I just going through the motions? When I do help other people, what's my motivation? Is there some other motivation? Am I looking for the praise of man? This is a good one. Why do I show up to church? And like for y'all specifically, this is the night church crowd. So if I had to bet, I'd say there's some hungry people in here, You guys came to church at night. Society's like, what? But even as a night church goer, we do run the risk of coming for the wrong reasons, right? We could have a priority mixed up. We could come here out of habit, maybe, or come here on autopilot, just not really thinking about it. I've done it for 50 years, so why wouldn't I do it again? Are you here because you're hungry for God? That's kind of the question. Or are you here because somebody brought you here? Heidi? Yeah, I guess you had to get a ride. That's the way it goes sometimes. I'm sorry for calling you out. All right. So while we're talking about church, I do want to take a slight little detour and talk just for a second about church attendance shouldn't be the bar for oh, that's a healthy Christian. And that could make people on various sides of that argument upset. I'm not trying to upset anybody. I think if you're hungry for God, you're coming to church. And you want to come to the assembly. But we shouldn't view it as the end. So if Jacob is a non-Christian, it's not just oh, I want to get him here, and he'll just come here and then we're good. I want to bring people in, or I want to come and study with you guys. I want to encourage and sharpen one another because there's a whole lot of work to do outside of the walls. And so we could kind of view it as a spiritual gym where we all need to get buff together because there's some buff people need to take care of some buff business outside. And you can quote that, Jacob. Okay, so we got work beyond these walls. Signs of good hunger. I'm going to give you some signs of some good hunger. And so there are some benefits of looking out around you and saying, oh, that's a good quality. I like that. Number one, you can find role models, or you can find people you want to confide in and be close with. You want to be careful, though. You don't want to just look at people, if I was to look at Ben and be like, all right, well, I don't like these 3 things about him, and that makes me feel better. That would be I'm not encouraging you to do that. But you can spot, oh, this is a person I want to sharpen with. This is a person I want to be my role model. And then number 2, in the New Testament, several times we're reading about if you save somebody that's wandering away, whew, how about that? So you do have to kind of be aware if somebody starts to wander. So, but anyways, I can't tell you what's in your heart, but just based on the scripture and observations, number 1, first sign is you show up. I don't think you're that hungry if you don't show up. That's just my opinion. We can debate that later. Sign number 2, you leave your comfort zone in service to God. Okay? Because if you're only willing to serve God where you're very comfortable, that kind of means that you're Lord of your life and not him. So think about your gifts and your skills and what God's given you. Use that to serve God, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not. Number 3, you get others involved. I think of Brian when I think of this, because he might even be doing all 3 of these right now. You are always here, like always, and you're always pulling other people in via this thing. See, look at that. Hello. I think it's great. Anyways, just, props to you. Anyways, getting other people involved. Think back to when I was eating that steak that I got from Texas Roadhouse. Man, if you have something good, don't you just want to share it? Yeah, I want to be like, guys, sit down, try this, try that. It's so good. The other day, I shouldn't say this, I'm going to talk too much about food. I was at the Japanese restaurant with Tyler Hamilton, and I was like, dude, try this yum yum sauce. He had never tried yum yum sauce before. Anyways, if you find something good, you want to share it. How much more do you want to share the words of life with people, right? So much more than a good steak or yum yum sauce. All right, so we've talked about what the goal is, what we should be hungering for, what it should look like. Where's the disconnect? And so that's going to be the next part of our sermon, is what's killing your appetite? What's killing my appetite? Or what's hurting my appetite? I'm not going to say it's completely dead for anyone. So, one of our key behaviors at work is called honest feedback. They have 4 key behaviors they're trying to get everybody to do. And one of them is honest feedback. And I really like that one. Because the idea is, if you're not willing to sit down and have a conversation about, hey, how can we get better? Or maybe how can we be more effective? How do you expect to get better if you're not willing to have those conversations? So, I hope that I don't step on anybody's toes. But if I do, I'm like an equal opportunity toe stepper. So, all kinds of toes possible to be stepped on. Okay. Sorry. All right, so, have you guys heard the expression, you are what you eat? Yeah, and that's pretty well true. I'm going to amend it a little bit. I'm going to say you eat what you want, and you start to want what you eat. Okay, you ever get a craving? I shouldn't tell another restaurant story, but I had Taco Bell cravings, or party bots, remember Alex? Once you eat one taco, there is no way on earth you're just eating one taco. Ben, Mariah, you guys had Taco Bell tonight. Did you eat just one thing from Taco Bell? Mariah did. You ruined my illustration. You eat what you want, and you want what you eat. You might start to crave something, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Every day, there's different things, there's different people, there's different desires inside of you, and they're all jostling. It's like they're trying to box one another out so they can get the rebound of your attention. Jacob picks up the phone. He's like, hey, consume the words that I want to say to you. I normally say yes, I'll answer Jacob's call because he encourages me. But you get to pick what you consume. So we'll camp on the idea for a minute longer. Let's think about this. Shout it out. What's a thing that would kill your physical appetite? Garbage? What do you mean by garbage? Stinky, like bad smells? Yeah, okay. Anything else? Being sick? What's that? Sour cream? Just kills your appetite. What about junk food? You ever spoil a meal because you eat junk food? Yeah. Dude, let me tell you what. My daughter, Lydia, she's 3. She is really into cookies. She's getting to be a cookie monster. Do you guys know what happens if we let her have too many cookies in between meals? She has no interest in nutrition. She doesn't have room for carrots, peas, broccoli, chicken, a roll. She is thinking about cookies. And they're better. Don't even get me started on cake. If she thinks cake is in the zip code, we're done. Junk food can mix up your appetite, and that can happen on a spiritual level too. When we start hungering for things other than God, and particularly when we start hungering for things more than God, that is when we start to kill our spiritual appetite. That's my claim. So, don't be deceived, don't be fooled. You're after something, whether it's God or not. And now we will read our verse. Well, it's small over there. I'm going to read it over here. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. And this is a bold thing that John is saying. This isn't like, you might want to avoid some of these desires in the world. No, this is, if you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. Okay, so you can't be like, God's left me. No, it's more like you've left God. You say, God, would you stay over here for a while? Because I really want what the world has to offer. But don't worry, I'll come back. That's not how it works. You're going to kill your spiritual appetite doing that. We've seen it happen. All right. The other thing in that verse is that if you want to abide forever, you have to love God so much that you place doing his will above all other priorities. That's what you have to do. Let's think back to our cookie example. Is a cookie a bad thing? No, a cookie's not a bad thing. Idolizing a cookie is a bad thing. Or idolizing many cookies would be a bad thing. And if I'm being honest, I think that's where a big opportunity for growth is. Not just like in Mountain View, but in the church here in America. We have an idolatry problem still. Sometimes it goes a little more covertly. But making an idol out of something that is a good thing, like a cookie or a job or a family, is still going to kill your appetite for God in a similar way that if you make an idol out of something that's overtly wrong, like say you're going and getting drunk. So we need to be aware of both. And I think sometimes what Satan does is he pits us against each other. Because, you got the one people who do idol worship this way and the other people who do idol worship this way. And, at least their way is better than their way. It's easy to say, hey, you're not being loving. Or, hey, yours is, overtly wrong. What's hard to do is to look at yourself. Take the idol, throw it on the ground, smash it, burn it, put it through a meat grinder, throw it in the dump. Whatever you got to do, it's harder to look at yourself and get rid of your own idol problem. But that's what we should do. 1 John 2:9. We shouldn't be overly concerned about somebody else's problem. Yes, we want to care for them and we want to help them. But whoever says he is in the light and hates his brother is still in darkness. All right? Don't tell me you're hungry for God while you're hating your brother. That's not going to fly. What's the next one say? It's similar. It's 1 John 3. But if anyone has the world's good, he sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Don't close your heart off to people. Now, you may have to get creative. Life can be messy. It can be tricky. You might have to get creative. Find ways to love somebody, because it may not always be an obvious or an easy step forward. It does not take a rocket scientist, however. Jacob, you know a lot about rockets. It doesn't take a rocket scientist for you to determine what your idols are. We've already kind of bounced on a couple culturally relevant ones. I think we've got career and education, family, pursuit of people. I can think of a person who was in the flock and But all this person was focused on was getting a spouse. Years and years and years. And now, the person did eventually get the spouse, but their appetite for God's just, they're not anywhere to be found anymore. And that's sad. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and every sin which clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. This word here is interesting, I think. The word for cling, or like entangled, it says like sin clings to you or entangles. In Strong's Concordance, it's described as thwarting in every direction. Jacob, would you come up here for a second? I want to demonstrate what sin is. Would you stand right here? Yeah. Strong's calls it thwarting. No, face that way. Okay. Thwarting in every direction. Jacob, try to move. I can't do it. Okay, you may be seated. See, when you mess with sin, it's like getting a bear hug from me. Or it can be. Jacob was just thwarted in every direction. He tried to go this way. I was like, no, you're not going that way. He tried to go that way. You're not going that way. Thwarted in every direction. When you turn to sin, or, the passage says every weight. So maybe it's a thing that's not quite a sin, but it's dragging you down. Your appetite for God goes down. Our last verse in this section is Timothy. 2 Timothy 4, first part of the verse. It says, "For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica." Demas was a guy that was in ministry. He was working with Paul. I don't doubt that he had hunger for the Lord, but what happened? He fell in love with something else. He opened up his heart to something else, and he deserted. So maybe right now you're thinking, I want to hunger for God, but I don't know how. What am I going to do? Michael, you've said, yeah, I understand what it should be, but I don't get how to get there. I'm not feeling it. And that's hard. I've been there, and you have days sometimes, or weeks, months, sometimes years, where it's like, I don't feel like I used to feel. Where's the fire? Where's the passion? How do I get that back? Or how do I get better? How do I get some of it back? Or move and grow in the right direction? The unfortunate thing is I can't stand here and tell you that there is like a switch, like on the back of your head we can flip, and you'll just wake up hungry for God tomorrow. I don't have any exact words of a prayer you can pray, and then boom, hungry for God. God didn't give us any of those shortcuts. He's smarter than us, so it's probably for a reason. Here's what I'm going to say. I don't think that you're going to be able to change your hunger. I don't think you're going to be able to improve your hunger for God if you don't change your diet. I think a nutritionist would agree with me on that. Right, Mariah? Oh, she's not a nutritionist. I thought you were, never mind. Okay, I'll say it again. I don't think you're going to be able to improve your hunger without changing your diet. Sometimes when I ask people, I'll shoot a text or I'll just talk to them and say, hey, how can I pray for you? They'll be like, pray that I get closer to God. And I do pray that prayer for them. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, what? That's something you do. Go and do that. That's not something that happens to you. That's something that you can go and do, and you can start doing today. The trick is the feelings don't always come immediately. And you hear Doug preach on that sometimes too. He says feelings follow actions, and he's right. If you don't feel very in love with your wife, love your wife. The feeling will follow. So, Changing our diet. The Bible says if we draw near to God, he will draw near to us. So based on what we have seen in Scripture, I've got a fun little list of things that we can do to change our diet. The first one is communication with God. All right? What we say, the milk of the Word is like the purest thing that there is. So God's communicated to you. There's a whole lot of it. You should read it, and then read it again, and then just keep reading it. But don't forget about the prayer, and don't forget about the quiet time too. One thing I don't want to confuse you with is, I've never heard God audibly speak to me. God's communicated all his truth that he communicates right here. We can get it. And we know that if there's a thing that comes up in our life, an opportunity, but if it doesn't line up with this, then we know, okay, we're not going to do it. And we're not going to let any voice tell us otherwise. So, communicate with God, have some quiet time, have some prayer time, be in the Word. What's the next thing? Elimination of junk food. And just start with one, at least. Find something in your life that is not good for you. Maybe you're listening to some songs that aren't that great. Maybe they don't have a good message in them. Maybe there's lies tucked in them. Maybe there's a show that you're watching that's not good. It could be a number of things. Or maybe there's a friend or somebody that's really pulling you down, and you need to set up some boundaries, because maybe when you hang out with that person, you're not doing the right things. Take an inventory of your idols and smash one today. The next one is unification with brothers and sisters. Your hunger for God, I don't think is going to improve very much if you're not opening your heart and acting lovingly to your brothers and sisters. Next one, dedication to serving others. Just like Jesus, our food is to do the will of what he sent us to do. And that passage is awesome because it's talking about harvesting. So there's some evangelism that we can participate in. It's not Doug's job. It's not just Dave's job. Everyone here gets to play a role in winning people to Christ. Determination to the very end. I think of Paul, and we were already in this chapter, so we're going to go back to it. Paul was determined to the very end. This passage in 2 Timothy 4. So this is the last part of his last letter that we have. And in some earlier verses, he's like, dude, I've run the race. I've fought the fight. Getting the crown. And he says this. He says, at my first defense, nobody came. No one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. May it not be charged against them. But the Lord stood by me and strengthened me, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed, and all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. Man. He stood alone. Everybody deserted him. But he was determined. He's like, I'm sticking with this. I know the Lord's with me. I don't care if there's a lion right there. I'm standing, and I'm saying what's true. That's the kind of determination we need to have. I got some other stories I just want to reference. We won't go read them. Your homework can be to read them. I want you to be hungry. I encourage you, challenge you to be hungry like Jacob. And I do like you, Jacob. I mean the Jacob from the Bible. I can't condone every little thing Jacob from the Bible did. But when you read the stories about Jacob, you know that dude believed that the blessings from God were worth more than anything else. So you have the birthright story where he got the birthright from his brother. You have got the blessing from Isaac. They fooled Isaac to get that. And then he wrestled with God all night. And God touched his hip, I think, and got out of socket. And Jacob didn't give up even then. He was like, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. Jacob knew how valuable God's blessings are, more valuable than anything else. Be hungry like the woman in the crowd. She had the blood problem. She had spent all her money on physicians trying to get fixed. But she heard about Jesus. And she said, if I just get to him and touch him, I'll be healed. Bring that kind of faith and bring that kind of determination. Be hungry like the man who found the treasure in the field. That's in one of Jesus' parables. Once he found that treasure, that's what he wanted. He sold everything in order to buy that field so he could have that treasure. He was hungry. And then be hungry like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said, we're not bowing down to that idol. God can save us, but even if he doesn't, throw me in the fire because we're not doing it. We're that hungry for God. That's how valuable it is to be on God's team. It's more valuable than my life. You can put me in a furnace, but you can't take God from me. So as our conclusion, I don't know if Doug's got one coming or not, but I made up a rhyme for the year because I like to make up rhymes. So this one is, let's hunger and thrive in 2025. So, and I do have a verse that goes with that. For he satisfies the longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things. So, take those steps to get hungrier. And if you're hungry now, let's get even hungrier together. Take those steps. If you come to God and you seek him with your whole heart, and you hunger after him like some of these people did in the Bible, he's going to fill you with good things. You're going to be like, what was that one thing? Like, just so many good things, you're going to be like, please stop. There's too many good things, right? Like, open up a window, let some of the good things out. That's what it's going to be like.